how the smart contracts should be orchestrated at the first place. So that is the basic understanding which we are trying to understand and replicate in different models in terms of the modules and the submodules. Module is obviously the broader aspect. Anywhere when the prefix is sub itself is negating the impact. So wherever the word sub is utilized, that has to be negated. And negate the same and reutilize it with something which is more positive and which has more impact on the blockchain. So that's the key understanding of what we wish to discuss right now in terms of the parameters and all. Putting myself on mute, I have the data with me. We'll start the discussion in a while. Okay, first of all, we are going to start with the tagging part. I already have provided a little bit of data set as to how the codes should be coded in terms of the orchestration of the events for the probability and whatever the possibilities could be in terms of let's let's just stick to the understanding of a dice. So dice has 6 planes, so it's easy to do the numerical calculation evaluation for the parameter of performing the safety aspect of the submodules of few of the stuff around the Impula network, and the same would be reported for the next publication. So that's already there in the pipeline. It's just that uh, getting all the data sets perhaps in the best possible manner so that we can able to reutilize the data sets for creating a robust network. So for prevention of the problem statement which the world is facing, we have this tagging which is H04M. M stands for metal, 2203/6027. Then for the prevention of the same, we have H04Q 2213/13139. Intelligent network, that is SCP H04Q 2213/13345. For the probabilistic networks and the graphical models, we have G06N7/01. I think this one, the next one, I think I discussed maybe a week back, is G06N5/01. Dynamic search techniques, um, trees and branch and bond. Then we have the arrangements, that is protection against SMS fraud and mobile malware, H04W12/128. Network planning and designing, H04Q3/0083. Now, notification itself has a lot of weightage that is under H0 4M3/42042, that is notifying the party of information on the calling party. Okay, we did this. Let's understand um, the nuance for this. Okay. So we are going to understand the outbound traffic parameters and how outbound traffic parameters can be utilized to understand the transaction in the communication network itself. So the whole understanding here is to perform the risk assessment in advance so that whatever drilling we are doing in terms of the human capacity building, the scenarios, the events, they are well done in the present scenario so that in future if it happens we already have the results with us and it is mitigated with that data set itself. And the data set itself has to be a small network of candidates. You cannot have a very large network of candidates or subscribers, or perhaps the selection of the candidates should be dependent on multiple factors and should not be dependent or interdependent on the factors which have been used for 2G, 3G, 4G. So that is one of my feedback. And let's try and understand this stuff, which is to understand the machine learning module in terms of how machine learning module and risk processing module can work in synchronicity. That is, at one end of the spectrum there is monitoring stuff, at the other end of the spectrum we have the control stuff. Okay, so right now the good thing is a lot of training is being done and a lot of money is being pumped up just to train the models which are proprietary in nature. So it is training on the call logs. So you would be seeing a lot of numbers when they are displayed on the UI. They are red in color. That is something you have to be beware. Next we have the output is kind of where the tagging is whether it's a spam or it's a fraud or likelihood or whatever the probability score is. Honestly speaking, when we talk about the probability score, it can be scored on number of parameters. For the gravity and the simple understanding, keep it as simple as possible, along with the timelines, and look into the timeline where the call log of few folks was the number of call logs was less, and why there was surge in the increase of the call log. um, we already discussed that Tesla laws are not applicable henceforth, perhaps in the New World Order, because these laws were orchestrated at the time where the environmental data set was totally different. We like it or not, but the truth is, the global warming is real. It's not that something has been mitigated. Whatever efforts went into it in terms of the policies, the regulations, whatnot, it did not. The report card is negative in very simple words. So there's something called as transmission to the end user. Now, to the end user, there's a report card which goes like if you go on these applications, particularly if I just talk about India, you go to their applications, you will be able to see how many calls were actually stopped from not. Um, so the end user, the subscriber, is not even getting those spam calls. So that saves a lot of time. It takes away the systematic way of the orchestration of what the other parties were orchestrating, and at the same point of time, giving the leverage to the subscriber. So which is a good thing. Now, what should be done from the user action point of view while creating these algorithms is the onus. So from time to time, particularly this is a legal word, and it has a lot of power. It's a four-letter word called as onus. So the onus to prove something always lies with the party who is trying to fetch something from the other party in terms of the dispute. Now, to mitigate this onus, it is very important. Okay, good question. Okay, I got a question from. I need to answer. Addicted to water? Yes, absolutely yes. And perhaps I like to drink hot water, so hot water is good for the overall functioning of the organs and the other parts of the body. So yes, sometimes I do answer to the YouTube questions. Okay, next. Okay, so for the risk classification itself, we are utilizing different decision trees. And when we are trying to understand the data sources, so it is it can be based on multiple factors. So I'm not getting the factors, but the traffic pattern of how much a person is logged on to the number in terms of the conversation, that tells the social skill set of that individual itself. Um, Honestly speaking, for me it's zero. I don't like to pick up calls. I don't like to answer calls. It's very I would say for me personally, I take that data set as zero. Then distributed architecture. Okay, if I have to talk about real time, okay, so if we talk about the spectrum here itself, what we need to understand is from two end of the spectrum, one end would be the adaptive learning, second would be the supervised learning. So the human intervention has to happen. It is just different drills have to be performed in real time to understand where all human intervention should happen for the cybersecurity work to be deployed in a manner whereby it is secured enough and it takes into consideration um, the focal points. So here the focal points, let's identify the focal points into HACCP. So if we take the focal points equal to HACCP, HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. So the critical control points are like focal points. Okay, this is done. I will discuss about another application here. So we will talk about the countermeasures here. What are the countermeasures which are understood while managing the data, particularly from the standpoint view of input data? Because many a times there's so much of data, but at the back end of the admin, it's still a question mark as to how the data should be utilized for the purposes to be resolved. Okay, for the management, we have G06Q10/00, that is particularly understanding risk assessment of a portion of a particular computing system. This is something which we have been doing for the longest time, so I'll skip this. We will talk about forecasting dashboard. So here we will talk about the vulnerabilities and evaluating the modules for the security purpose. That is G06F21/577. Um, Denial of service H04L63/1458. Then we have the auditing of a secondary aspect, that is G06F2221/2101. Um, Generation of reports related is H04L43/065. Scorecard benchmarking key performance indicator, that is a KPI, is G06Q10/06393. Enterprise risk assessment would be G06Q10/0635. Okay, let's look into why does it seem that I adopted this one. Okay, anyhow, so we have the APIs and we have a dashboard. Dashboard is all to do, I would rather say, for the dashboard stuff. So there's an application called as Mentimeter. Look into that application. I'm of the opinion, from the standpoint view of primary research, it's a very good tool just to get the keywords from the users as to how they perhaps think about that particular scenario or a question or an embodiment or an event. So those things will give a very honest feedback. What is the need of the R in terms of the understanding of the language models which we are training is getting right feedback, not the artificial or synthetic feedback, which is particularly the way few of the operators in the world wants the world to work or get into that direction. So we need to obviate that in real time, which is very important. Um, then we talked about, okay, so data framework. I'll just bifurcate it for a few folks. If we have enterprise data, we can always have organizational data, framework data, then there's assessment objective project data. um, so this is done. Data storage. Okay, so I'll walk you through on a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of the color coding of something which is already standardized. So standardized is like you can take it as statement of protocol, so SOPs, or something which which cannot be changed. That is something, a kind of a core, but I honestly believe core always changes, so it cannot be a core. A standard protocol which is like just do it. You don't have to think about it, that kind. So that is basically the maturity score of the same is taken as 3 for the standardization. And it is the role and the responsibilities are very well defined. That means scope of work and standardization procedures, controls, derivatives are not detected here. However, if I talk about the SWOT analysis here, it is limited exposure to threat, near full control to protect asset or critical functions. Okay, when we talk about the manage and the optimize part, optimize is number 5. So highly automated. However, I feel with the high automation rate also you need to have human intervention. You cannot allow anything to be run on a computing stuff 24 cross 7. You need to identify the timelines where you need to log in and understand and read through every data set. And here you need to have the most skilled people, because unskilled worker at number 5, which is highly automated, is not going to give you results. You need highly skilled candidates to perform the optimization part. Um, okay, then we have the management part, which is number 4. Limited automation, management monitors, measures, and takes action. It is more like a team setup where there are perhaps 3 to 4 candidates who are looking into the data set, and then perhaps taking calls, issuing tokens. So if you have to issue tokens, that has to be at number 4, at the management level, not at the optimization level. This is a very different framework, not very well written in the books and all, but this is something which I have learned over the years, perhaps after doing the ICOs with the other parties on a global basis in 2017, 2018. Okay, then we have the implementation process, which is number 2, developing is number 1, and evaluation is number 0. Welcome to New World Order. Evaluation is number 0. So when we are evaluating, we are still finding whether to kill the switch or to go ahead with the whatever the problem statement which we are trying to solve. So at 0, you are at full exposure to the threat, no controls to protect the asset and the critical function, which itself needs to be defined. It's a very open-ended, vague way of definition of the number 0. However, I'm of the opinion periphery should be defined at 0 because it's very, very important. Then development, we are talking about ad hoc approaches. It's basically exposed to threat, minimal control to protect asset or critical function. Again, this needs a periphery. So once you have the periphery and the data sets, you'll be in a better position to have a guardrail around the same. Then we talked about the standardization part. Okay. Do I wish to discuss the forecast? Let's see. So take the example of Finland. Here the servers are underground. So what they are doing right now is, this is something which we need to see as a country in India. So servers are underground. Whatever heat is being generated is being utilized for warming the city. So perhaps we have been talking about energy harvesting, and right now, irrespective of the sector, we need to understand whatever the energy or whatever is there in the atmosphere, how that can be utilized rather than killing the whole process. Because if it can be utilized to function out certain functionalities, that is part of the circular economy. So that is something which ones need to peek in and understand in depth, so that understanding can be utilized for for productive work. Okay, last but not the least, I would just focus on this part and we'll end this discussion here. This is policy based encryption. So, policy based encryption, I am more interested in the classification. Let's see. Okay, disassembly. So, okay, disassembly is part of G06F8/53. Then we have something which is of my interest would be encapsulating the payload, applying encryption by an intermediary, example receiving clear information at the intermediary and encrypting the received information before forwarding. So this is important. And this is H04L63/0471. Multiple level of security, H04L63/105. Revocation or update of secret information. This is very important in terms of rekeying. So it's the encryption key is updated. So what are the um, important determination questions that has to be feeded at this point? Um, this is part of, perhaps if I have to talk about key transport of distribution, that is H04L line/0825, that is KPI public key infrastructure authentication H04W12/06. Okay, location dependent GPS, that is proximity dependent during geofencing stuff. Already worked on it. H04W12/64. You just need to go and look into the application I worked on. That is more than enough to create the first line of defense for now. So this is done. Do I wish to discuss the application? So I think most of the folks know this term, BYOD, that is bring your own device policy. So in which the user is bringing the personal application and the secure enterprise application on the mobile device. So I think it stands for something else also for normal people, but in the language of technology, BYOD is bring your own device. Okay. Let me just, I think I can discuss one more. Okay, so this is kind of a peer-to-peer understanding how authentication can be done. So if you know, Microsoft Authenticator right now is utilizing that app whereby you give the number and then you're able to log in. So this is one way of doing it. There's something called as WKEK, that is wrapping key encryption key on the first use of the first authenticator. Perhaps here we have, which is important here is, you have a biometric input, and when we are trying to understand the longevity, it can be utilized there. So the biometric input is basically onto a biometric device where the first component element and the like is a sensor. So what is the sensor doing? It is extracting the feature, then it is matching, generating a score into the application, and that is the the matchmaking is being done with a reference scorecard. Okay. So in very simple words, I'll explain this architectural framework. There is a client handheld device, which is a candidate client handheld device, or I'd rather just focus on the word candidate. Um, we have the location sensor, that is the GPS. Then we have the user behavior sensors. Then we have additional sensors. Okay. Then we have non intrusive authentication, which is basically, again, taking into account uh, the parameters of the location, the behavior, and the additional parameters. Then there is something evaluating on the assurance side, and there's a timer which is looking into the user authentication device and uh, for the biometric input, and there's a cloud service also. So if I just, oh my goodness, how big is this application? Okay. User behavior. How are they measuring the user behavior? Let's look into this. User. Okay. So I'll talk about a little bit about this user behavior understanding. It is used to determine the gait of the user currently in possession of the device, and it is measuring with the known gait of the user to arrive to a level of confidence that the legitimate user is in possession of the device. Okay, they're actually, so user behavior is nothing but whether it's the same person using the device or not, and every individual has a different gait. So gait here is not GATE, it's GAIT. And what else? So we would be just discussing this application a little bit in detail. So it's more from the authentication point of view as to the user who is, or I would rather say the candidate who is having this handle device is the same candidate or not. So particularly, it is taking into consideration the gait of the individual and determining it with the application. So whether this application has a lot of value as the problem statement the world is going through, the answer is no. Um, okay. But definitely we can understand this from the viewpoint of generating keys. So key is different from an OTP, and a lot of innovation, a lot of simple tweak has been done in the past, where for the peer-to-peer network to happen in the best of possible manner, a lot of applications are already there. So it is not advisable to create something new. It is better to research around the same and utilize it to develop future products. So I think we are good for now. Thank you for watching this out, and I'm sure this will give the timeline and the understanding of the blockchain in terms of the smart contracts, particularly from the standpoint view of testing few of these stuff which we have been talking over last 15-20 days. So let's do this and try and get to a point where this can be shared with a larger mass of people in the world. Thank you for watching this out. Have a great day ahead.